When you delve into the history of each expansion like I spend far too much of my life doing, the majority of the time all the puzzle pieces start to come together to identify the flaws in the game. This could be reasons behind lack of content from patch to patch, or even why some expansions just feel less polished than others. All the way back in 2009 at BlizzCon, when Cataclysm was first revealed, they explained and showcased all the new systems coming to the game. There was one that was talked about and even made an appearance in the trailer, but never made it into the game: the Path of Titans. These kind of systems won't be new to retail players, a system where over the course of the expansion, the system grows with your character gains more customization, and then inevitably all of it disappears when the next expansion hits. It basically is just borrowed power, but many systems that are not even looked at as borrowed power, when you really strip everything back, they kind of still are. How close to a finished product this system actually was remains a mystery, but if it was finished off and added into Cataclysm Classic, it could really make for an interesting version of the game. Before we get into what the system is, let's look at some historic footage from BlizzCon 2009 and get a real understanding of how it could have impacted the game. This could be for better or for worse.
We have this new feature called Paths of the Titans. And what we want to do with this feature is reward character progression at max level. What happens is you get Wrath of the Lich King, you're jamming out your levels, you get 10 levels to go, it's really, really fun, you're like constantly improving, new abilities, new ranks, new talent points, then you hit 80, and it really slows down. And, you'll get loot, whether you raid or PvP, you'll slowly improve your loot over time, but basically that really fun period of leveling up has kind of come to a stop. And one way to do that is just keep making more and more levels. Hey, maybe Cataclysm gives you 15 or 20 new character levels. That would give us a headache. So instead we wanted to come up with a system that rewards progression at max level without having to necessarily go into more talent points, more abilities. The main reward for the paths is to unlock a new type of glyph called an ancient glyph. Now these glyphs work a little differently than the glyphs you're used to from your class glyphs. We're really happy with what Inscription has done, and we think the glyphs have added some depth to the game, but we also think the feature's not 100% there. We've always thought it had a little more potential we could milk out of it, and so we're kind of uniting that with the path system here.
One thing that might not be very clear to you is what we actually got instead of this system was prime glyphs. When they decided against Path of the Titans, they added these new prime glyphs. So essentially, it's just 3 additional glyph slots that are not dissimilar to major glyphs. In fact, the prime glyphs really are your major glyphs of Wrath of the Lich King. It doesn't really matter how you look at these prime glyphs because they really are just borrowed power as well. Because come Mr. Pandaria, glyphs are far less important. In fact, prime glyphs were removed completely. So in fact, prime glyphs only lasted for the Cataclysm expansion anyway.
They are themed for the Titans, and they're not at all part of the Inscription profession. So Inscription will continue to make your class-specific major and minor glyphs. Ancient glyphs is from an entirely new mechanic here. And one of the exciting things about the paths is they're not class-specific. There's not a rogue path to follow. You guys can debate as long as you want about what's the best path for rogues, and we're all cool with that, but one of the exciting parts is that you can mix and match the specific path you choose to follow with the talent trees you already have.
So what they done essentially was traded in a cool progression system which would keep you striving towards something for just 3 extra glyph slots. Let's get into what Path of the Titans was meant to be and how it could have worked, then ultimately why Blizzard should polish it off and add it into a classic version of the game. The initial goal of it was to have a progression system that lasted the whole expansion. There were 6 different Titans.
So these are 6 of the known Titans of Azeroth, and 6 of the paths that we might introduce when Cataclysm goes live. You're probably familiar with several of these names.
These Titans were Agramar, Amanthal, Iona, Khazgoroth, Golganeth, and Norgannon. Hopefully the pronunciations were at least close. But these would then give you the path of either the Avenger, the High Father, the Lifebinder, the Shaper, the Thunderer, or the Dreamweaver. We do have some examples of what some of these abilities would actually look like, specifically if you was to align yourself with Golganeth. And Golganeth is a member of the Titan Pantheon and is the Lord of the Skies and Roaring Oceans, according to Wowpedia.
Remember, these have to be, I don't want to say generic, but they're not going to be class-specific. They're not going to be modifying your Sinister Strike, for example. They have to be things that might benefit different types of classes. So an example of a rank 1 glyph here is reducing the duration of bleed and stun effects, which can obviously be useful in certain situations. Here's a rank 2 example. Bandages heal targets by additional amount. But if you don't like that one, you can take the Fortification talent instead, which is a clicky ability with a longer cooldown but instant that lets nearby allies take less damage for a little bit. So you can see these are game-changing in some sense.
Whether or not the kind of bonuses you got were tied to each individual Titan, as in one was more tanking focused, one was more DPS focused, one was more healing focused, that's not known, but it would kind of make sense. So you would have to align yourself with one of these 6 Titans to unlock the new ancient glyphs. If I'm honest, the initial glyph layout looked pretty bloody awesome for this Path of the Titans system.
Glyph of swipe or whatever, so I don't know that this color palette is final, it's probably not, but you get the basic idea. There's a big claw in the middle because you're a feral druid and you have 6 of your class, the gold ones are the major and the blue ones are the minor glyphs. And now around the outside are the new path glyphs. When you start out at level 80, you won't have any path glyphs. You won't get any of them all until level 85. This is all maximum character level progression stuff. And then slowly over time, you'll earn these new glyphs. You can see we go all the way up to rank 10. I don't think we'll offer rank 10 when Cataclysm first ships, but one of the things we think is cool is to gradually unlock new ranks over time. So when patch, I guess it would be 4.1 or 4.2 would come out, one of the bullet points might be now you can achieve rank 8 in your path. We'll also theme the UI, and maybe even the path itself will change shape depending on which Titan you're aligning yourself with.
So as you just saw, it would have 10 slots, and then you'd still have your 3 minor glyphs and 3 major glyphs. Each major phase of content that would come out, you would unlock additional ancient slots. What also seems evident is with each slot it looked like you had 2 choices of a different kind of ancient glyph. These naturally would get more and more powerful as you go through the glyph tiers, and the higher ones would no doubt be more impactful to PvE and PvP content than the first ones that you unlock. An example of an early one being 10% damage reduction to players near you as a cooldown, that would be absolutely immense. Imagine bringing multiple people in the raid with this 10% damage reduction cooldown and then chaining it through extremely dangerous abilities when you're actually raiding. On the basis this was just one of Golganeth's early ones, who knows what the other ones would have been. Another Titan, there could be 10% damage increase on a cooldown, or even a healing increase for the raid on a cooldown. There really isn't enough known about the system, because we know it wasn't fully formed. Or we think it wasn't fully formed. Why it never was actually finished off is beyond me, because this could and would have been absolutely insane. When I said about jigsaw pieces coming together, it does make me wonder, with the content being such a step up in difficulty in Cataclysm, if the initial raid tier and heroic dungeons were even being tuned with ancient glyphs in mind. Don't get me wrong, the prime glyphs are a decent amount of power to players, but they ultimately are just major glyphs from Wrath. Things like increasing rip-up time by shredding for druids, it already exists now in Wrath, it's just been renamed and moved to a prime glyph. The thing I find really interesting with the Path of Titan system is a lot of it revolved around archaeology, which is the new secondary profession. How that would have looked, no clue. But you would probably have to go out and solve the ancient glyphs before you could physically use them, which would actually help keep the world alive with people flying all over when new content hits each phase to solve their new ancient glyphs, and just give us more things to do in general. You might have a major concern with all of this like I did, where you're forced to grind it out to be competitive, and taking a break from the game for a few weeks could massively be detrimental to your progress towards ancient glyphs. Well, that's kind of not what the vision was for it, because they even said it would be gated but not grindy. Eventually everyone would have them unlocked. Now, what Blizzard's idea of not grindy was back there and what ours is today could be 2 very different things, but you would expect a little bit of work to go into unlocking some of the big ancient glyphs, and it would be great if they even tied into PvE content for PvE glyphs. Obviously for PvP glyphs, you would want PvP content to unlock them. What I mean by this is if there were certain things that you needed to do during a boss fight to uncover the big ones towards the end. For example, going into Halls of Origination, which is a perfect setting of a heroic dungeon, to actually add a new boss in there, or a mechanic to a boss which has to be executed in a certain way to be able to learn your new ancient glyph. Or even similar to how when you're working on your Firelands legendary staff, you have objectives to do during the boss fights as part of the quest chain. How I see it would be you would uncover the glyph from Archaeology, but this then starts a quest and sends you into somewhere to complete a task before you can physically use it. The possibilities are just endless what Blizzard could actually do with a system like this, especially if some of it's already in place and they've got some of this in early builds of Cataclysm, because it would mean they've not got as much work to do. They can just build out on a system that was already put there, but I wouldn't imagine it was just deleted. I'm going to leave you with just another small clip from BlizzCon 2009 where they was actually talking more about this system, and then I'll bid you farewell.
You can choose to align yourself with one of these cults, and in return you can progress down a path. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then as you progress down the path, you're getting these new ancient glyph sockets. And ultimately you get new ancient glyphs to put in the sockets. Cool points about this is you earn these ancient glyphs through archaeology. So as you're leveling up, archaeology is giving you cool things, perhaps new items, new vanity pets. You can trade some stuff in for gold and things like that. But then once you hit level 85, you can start using archaeology to trade into these cults, and in return, they'll give you the glyphs that you'll use. And one of the cool things is, kind of like with your class glyphs, you have choices. Even though you pick a particular path, you still have choices of what glyph you want to put in that slot. So if you're a healer, maybe you want a healing glyph. Maybe there isn't always a healing glyph at every point along the path, though. And of course, you can respec. You're not locked into any of these decisions. You have to unlock them originally, but once you do, you can tie it to dual spec or whatever you want.
So I hope you enjoyed the video. Wouldn't it be cool if we got something like this, where it would almost feel like Classic Plus? I know many of you, when you want Classic Plus, you want vanilla version of the game, like Vanilla Plus, not Classic Plus, or not Cataclysm Plus. But I'd take Cataclysm with a brand new system like this in that we've never actually got to use before, even though we may have seen it before. What do you think? Be sure to like and subscribe. See you on the next one.